to the skate park we go. Oh, you know what I don't have? Forgot the skateboards. Right, got these now. I'm a big fan of 3D cameras, although I don't really use this one anything like as much as I should, so I'm going to try and make more use of it. We're obviously going to the skate park, and today I'm going to be in the rather unusual position of defending Billionaires. Because Jeff Bezos is going to space today. We've had the turn of Richard Branson, now it's Jeff's go. Does he?
Yeah.
So, Jeff Bezos is actually, right this very second, going into space, courtesy of his New Shepard suborbital ride, and he's going with a few other people, most notably Wally Funk, who is she was one of the Mercury 13, so she was put through astronaut training the same as men were back in the, I think it was 60s, and but never actually got to fly in space. It was more a kind of can women do it sort of investigation. So yeah, it's cool that she's actually going to get to go to space. Granted, she won't get to stay there for very long, but she is going. Now, and this comes up hot on the heels of Richard Branson's recent suborbital flight or high altitude flight, depending on how much you care about the definitions of space. But I mean, fundamentally, for all intents and purposes, from an experiential point of view, suborbital space. Now, a lot of people have been wondering, what's the point? Wouldn't the money be better spent somewhere else? And in some ways, yes, but in some pretty significant ways, no. You see, the thing about space is difficult. It's really, really, really difficult. And it's so difficult that we haven't got it sorted yet. I would say that we're at the stage where, you know, we've not even got to the Wright brothers' first powered flight from a space point of view, in that what we've essentially got are, you know, space launch systems at the moment, and suborbital systems as well. It's very much more like a glider than powered flight. What I mean by that is, you know, a glider, you can use it for certain things. You can go off the top of a hill or a big cliff and, you know, glide round for a bit and see things and report and do some reconnaissance, maybe even, you know, travel some difficult to traverse terrain using it. What you can't do is fly from A to B, load up passengers and cargo and go from one country to another, or have any real flexibility built into it at all, because ultimately it's a glider. And it's the same with non-reusable spacecraft. They're like gliders. They are useful, they do the job, but they don't do it properly. It's not fully flexible. Everything is a case-by-case, can we make this work kind of thing. Whereas when you have reusability, you end up in a similar situation to what SpaceX will be, hopefully, when they complete their Starship program, which is the ability for NASA to say, oh, we need a moon lander, and SpaceX to go, okay, well, we can adapt what we've got because, you know, it can do that job. Or we need a Mars lander. Oh, it's okay, yeah, it can do that job too. Okay, well, you know, we need to launch stuff into low Earth orbit. Yep, can do that. We need to launch stuff to the moon. Can do that. That's the point. It's got flexibility. It can take people from one side of the planet to the other if it has to. It's really, really flexible. And you might think, well, why is that important? And okay, so there's two sides. You've obviously got the fact that investing that much in advanced engineering leads to all sorts of breakthroughs and you know, additional advances in unrelated scientific fields. But there's also a bigger point, which is that until we have conquered space, it's very difficult to say what use space is or isn't. I mean, how did we know? You know, all the answers to all our prayers could just be lying on the surface of the moon or Mars or something. We don't know. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what uses people will put to it. I mean, the first sort of example of something which wasn't really feasible without reusability is probably the low Earth orbit constellation of internet satellites that are going up, notably SpaceX, but also OneWeb as well. They're doing it. And the thing about those is because of the number of satellites you require for a low Earth orbit internet constellation, it's really, really expensive to do it if you can't reuse the launch vehicle, which is partly why OneWeb satellites are higher, so they need less actual launches, whereas SpaceX have got a reusable first stage at least, so they're quite happy to put them in a lower orbit. And lower orbits are better because although you need more satellites, you end up with much less latency, and you can serve many more customers because you've got many more satellites. You know, when you have one satellite that sits out in geostationary orbit taking care of a quarter of the planet's internet on its own, well, obviously there's a limit to how many individual customers it can serve at any one time. And you know, you don't have that same limit when each satellite only has to worry about a 100-mile sort of square of land that it has to deal with. How does that tie back to these billionaires busy going on joyrides? Well, I mean, these are joyrides, but they're spending money on high-paying engineering jobs and science and development, and the more these things get done, the more commoditized they become, and the more efficiently and safer we can do them, and also the better able we are to take whatever the next step is beyond that. All right, Jazzy, come for some water.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll do a video on my BMX next week.
Well, you've already got some footage of you on your BMX though. You could use that. Why don't you tell me about your BMX now, and then we'll virtually have shot that video already.
Jazzy out. And also thanks for the water.
Yeah, so I view it as not in and of itself especially useful. I mean, there's not a huge amount of science that can be done in 3 or 4 minutes worth of weightlessness. There is some. There are some viable scientific payloads that can be, carried up for that length of time and be worth doing. But it's not the majority of the point. I personally think the majority of the point is to get money flowing into the space launch industry and into the development of novel spacecraft designs and fuels and stuff like that, because if we don't move it forwards, then it isn't going to move forwards. It's not like ever faster mobile phones are going to suddenly lead to cheap space launches. It's just not going to happen. And in terms of pollution, yeah, they do create pollution, but only a tiny amount. It's negligible. I mean, if people were that bothered about pollution, then basically it's like this. Anyone who doesn't drive an EV and complains about the pollution from rockets doesn't understand about pollution and quantities. And equally, anybody who complains about rockets and buys food in wrappers that have to be discarded doesn't get it. This is a tiny fraction of these things. I mean, not having throwaway packaging and everyone driving EVs will make 3 orders of magnitude difference versus banning all rocket flights forever. So yeah, it doesn't compute. I don't understand, and I'm really chuffed, and good luck Bezos. In fact, let's find out how he's doing. Yep, well, they're back on the ground now by the looks of things. That's made my day. Pleased that's gone off successfully. Good old Jeff. I've got to say, he's probably my least favourite of the billionaires out there. Partly because I don't really feel like Blue Origin is really pushing the boundaries that much. I mean, it's a bit like, let me put it this way. If SpaceX didn't get the funding for the human landing project, then they would just build Starship anyway, because they're building Starship and that's the end of that. if Jeff Bezos doesn't get it, he probably won't bother building a lander. He probably, well, he's already got to the point. I mean, so he wants to launch this. I think it's called Project Kuiper, which is basically another low Earth orbit constellation of internet satellites, and those satellites were originally going to be launched on a New Glenn, which is their upcoming orbital rocket, which is partially reusable, just like a Falcon 9. Now, what's interesting is that they've actually booked in a bunch of Vulcan launches, I think, and I think maybe even some Atlas launches as well, to launch their satellites rather than New Glenn, because New Glenn isn't there yet, and they're moving so slowly. I don't know when it will be, and that's the problem with Blue Origin. They just are so unbelievably slow. I mean, their motto is Gravitam Ferociter, I believe, which means step by step, ferociously. But there's no ferocious as far as I can tell, and the step by step is sort of like geriatric, half dead step by step. So yeah. Anyway, I mean, you know, still, at least they've done something. Maybe it'll speed up now that Jeff has given up his Amazon CEO-ship. Perhaps he'll concentrate on Blue Origin, and they will start to really, you know, get a move on. If only because Jeff will be so bored waiting for anything interesting to happen. That's in stark contrast to SpaceX and Starship, where honestly there's so much that happens every week. It's, you know, it's nuts. Okay, everybody. Well, I think that's all I've got to say on the subject of billionaires spending their hard-earned cash on space. I think the number one thing to remember is, you know, keep it in perspective. Think of it as a kind of like a philanthropic gesture. They're paying for research into aerospace that will hopefully benefit all mankind. And they're doing it for no reason other than, I guess it must be tricky to work out what to spend your money on when you've got that much. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. If you have, remember to leave a like and share it and subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you don't already. And a massive thank you to my Patreon supporters, and I'll see you all in the next episode of my vlog. Bye!